So this afternoon we're going to speak for about 45 minutes on what the opportunities, the strategies and the challenges so that we can grow the trade and investment opportunities between New Zealand and India. We're going to touch on sectors for dairy, agriculture, technology, education, tourism, and throw in a bit of sports diplomacy as well. So please have your questions ready at the end, and we're going to start off very quickly with a quick introduction from each of the panelists.
Kia ora and good evening everyone. Namaste. My name is Bharat Chawla. I'm the chair of INZPC and also playing the role of education and immigration part today.
Kia ora, namaste. My name is Peter Miskina, head of sport diplomacy for government. While I base myself out of Sport New Zealand, the role is actually across government. So I work extensively with Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Enterprise, Tourism, Education New Zealand, and a whole lot of other like Asian New Zealand Foundation. So my role is across government, and I look forward to the conversation today.
Kia ora koutou and namaste. My name is Justine Arrell. I'm the General Manager of Trade Strategy at Fonterra. We are a farmer-owned cooperative exporting to around 120 markets around the world, including India, and really looking forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chandan Nori. I'm the CEO and founder for GECO Consultancy. We are a New Zealand company with offices across Australia, Fiji, India and US. As a New Zealand company, we are one of the largest employers in India, if not the largest, with 125 people. And I'm looking forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
Kia ora everyone. John Allen. I manage a number of markets for Mr. Apple. We only grow and sell apples, so that's all I deal with. We're a reasonably large exporter to India, and have been exporting there for just over 20 years, I guess. I was just saying to Christine, this discussion is timely. We started packing this week, and I started negotiations yesterday with my Indian receivers, so it'll be interesting to see if I can get any tips on maybe how to deal with them.
Thank you. Now, we're going to start off with Bharat. As chair of the India-New Zealand Business Council, you played a significant role in fostering trade and investment. I want to get your take on what's the mutual opportunities, particularly in education and tourism, which makes up, I think, about 40% of the total trade.
Great. Thank you, Christine. I think going from the INZPC perspective, we are there for more than 30 years now. We have been trying to work hard to make sure that if we can facilitate something, to be very fair, I said, good to see the trade numbers going up from, like Minister said, up 30% bilateral trade. In terms of education and tourism, I think I'll very clearly say that we have to do a lot. We have not done yet much, though we have 40% of the total trade numbers. But if you see India comparatively to other countries, the trade in education only, it is doubled or more than doubled with UK, Canada, Australia. So we are still far behind that. But the landscape is getting better, I can say that.
Excellent. Now, there's another part of this which is about, in India, there's a Make in India campaign. How does that fit with this goal of increasing the relationship?
I think if we want to do business with India, we want to talk about Make in India, to be very fair. Now, I attended a couple of events in January when I was in India. There is clear-cut seen in India that if somebody is talking about manufacturing in India, they are welcome. A lot of product link incentive scheme, which is a PLI scheme we call, people who from overseas who want to manufacture in India, they get a lot of incentives from government. So the direction from the government of India is to all their councils are there. If you have any country, any business who want to invest in India in the manufacturing sector, they are welcome, and Make in India is what they want to build on it. The same part which you see the Invest in New Zealand, which is starting from New Zealand perspective, India have invested in India. And I was talking the numbers, New Zealand only invested $84 million last year. So that number is very, very small compared to what they want from
A
us.
rounding error.
So this is a lot to be done. And I think when I was talking, and like Minister said, you need to see the states. You can't see country as a whole to India, states or cities. There's a lot happening in every state. There were 6 odd investment events run last year. Like even February, we have Assam government running an event. They were simply saying that if you're in India, any part of India, will fly you there, give an accommodation, come and sit and see what we are offering you for 2 days. So that kind of investment, and in Rajasthan, which is another state, they have 8,000 people attending that. So the scale is massive, the opportunity is massive.
Excellent. Thank you. I want to move on now to looking at the industry view and some key sectors driving the relationship. We have technology, we have dairy and agriculture, all represented here on the stage today. Starting off with technology, Shandan, you're founded and CEO of Duco Consulting. You have offices and people in India, New Zealand, Australia, Fiji and US, growing rapidly, all in the space of about 6 years. The opportunity is immense and is extremely sophisticated in India with their stacked development, which they're now expanding and making available for others around the world. So I wondered, my question for you is, how can the New Zealand-India collaboration drive digital transformation, skills transfer and scalable ventures?
Thank you. I think the technology collaboration between New Zealand and India has been there for a very long time, but probably not obvious. So every large Indian IT company, TCS, Tata Consulting Services, HCL, Infosys, Wipro, they have established offices in New Zealand. They have a large employment base in New Zealand. Fonterra and HCL have been working for a very long time with almost 250 people since days IBM, where I was the managing partner, New Zealand and then Australia, large presence between IBM India and IBM Australia. So a lot of large pieces of work, whether it's with foodstuffs, whether it's with Fonterra, whether it's with ANZ, is being delivered with the capability and skills at scale that these Indian companies can bring to New Zealand. And I think the New Zealand organizations are very, very happy and content because those arrangements have continued year on year with these Indian companies. What we are now also seeing is organizations like us, a small New Zealand company, when we are bidding for large projects in New Zealand, Australia, US, we are able to provide the solution architecture and the high-level expertise that comes with the high level of digital transformation that New Zealand has. But when we want to go at scale for those large organizations, we are harnessing the power of India in terms of that technology capability. And that's what is represented in our India Delivery Center. So we have 125 people today, and we are now in the process of it's under construction, another delivery center with 350 people, which will be ready by October, November this year. And in Fiji, we are developing another delivery center for 100 people by June. So I think New Zealand has a lot to offer in terms of business process, automation, and what India has the skill, the capability to marry the two together and basically go for the world. Opportunities across the globe, which we can't do just by ourselves in New Zealand. So I think there's a great collab and marriage available between the two economies.
I'm glad you brought up about targeting the world, because we're just talking about New Zealand and India, but the relationship actually means so much more. And it's a global opportunity for scale and size that, as the discussion we were just having a minute ago, it's hard for New Zealanders to understand and fathom that sort of scale of the opportunity. Justine, Fonterra, what innovations and business practices are helping Fonterra add value to dairy exports? We've talked particularly in the functional proteins in India. I know that's an area you've been operating in.
Thanks, Christine. From a Fonterra perspective, when we think about India, the word collaboration really comes to mind. And across the sort of various elements of our engagement in India, there's sort of three key areas that I think are sort of worth touching on. The first is sort of your traditional sort of export sort of market play, where we are a very sort of small player in the Indian market, primarily exporting about $60 million worth of high-value proteins to the Indian market. And this is a really exciting sort of proposition for us because these are products that are not produced locally in India, so the trade is really complementary in terms of adding value to the Indian food and beverage manufacturing sector and complementing local supply. And I think from a Fonterra perspective or a New Zealand dairy perspective, we can really only ever hope to play a small role in complementing local dairy production in India because, as much as we like to think of ourselves as a sort of a global player when it comes to dairy production, the reality is really that we're dwarfed by India. New Zealand accounts for about 2 to 3% of global production, and India is much larger, at about 23%. So, from our perspective, that opportunity to play in the functional protein space, where we are adding through sort of research and development and innovation value to New Zealand dairy exports and complementing that local supply in India is really exciting for us. The other sort of the second element is really, I think, what Chandon was talking about in terms of the tech collaboration. So again, while we may be sending sort of small volumes of primarily proteins to India, we're also importing services and IT and technical support through our partnership with HCL, and that's a really important part of our business in India. And then finally, I guess while it's sort of not so much in the commercial space, I did just want to highlight the valued cooperation and engagement that we have with the Indian dairy industry in India, the likes of Amul and NDDP. There's a lot that we as kind of global dairy producers have in common, and lots of opportunities for us to think about shared opportunities and challenges that we need to grapple with together as industry.
Excellent. We have a very good example of operating, working in India, Make in India, with Jeff Alec in the audience today with Quality NZ. And so it's really good to highlight these examples of what can be done. John, Mr. Apple, there you are down there. We're, what makes India a unique market for premium exports, and how does your strategy perhaps differ from your other export markets?
Okay, well, obviously the opportunity in India is enormous. There's not a product produced in New Zealand at some point isn't looking that way. For us, it's probably where we influence the consumer. Traditional markets throughout most of Asia, we can concentrate on large supermarket chains. We can typically reach most of our consumers through online or in-store marketing and promotion. In India, as many of you will know, the grocery trade or your traditional grocery is 10%, and it's the 90% that we have to work differently to find. And that's driven some change in how we focus on India. We did a bit of research. We recognised that even the wholesalers who we've dealt with for a number of years, their influence is somewhat with the roadside stalls, but those are the people with their individual small businesses who influence the consumer. They hold the trust of the consumer. They're talking to their customers every day. They're inviting them to try different products, and that's where we're starting to focus our promotional marketing spend, I guess. is seeing we can reach them through those smaller players. That's probably the key where we see it.
Excellent. Are there any comments from others on that? No? That's, so it's great to see how the private sector is stepping up, and I think, regardless of how other things develop with government and relations, I think it's up to the private sector, I think, to sort of lead the way and keep doing what they're doing and doing more of it. Peter, now to you. So sports is an unconventional but powerful platform for economic diplomacy. So how can sports be leveraged for business and trade relationships?
Unconventional maybe, but it's growing worldwide in terms of a soft power. Countries around the world now are seeing it as a really unique way of engaging, of creating people-to-people moments, and making connections and networks. A good example, dare I say it, is Australia recently, you would have heard, just signed a $600 million Australian deal with Papua New Guinea in rugby league, about having a rugby league team in the Australian competition. This isn't about rugby league, it's about security. So that's a good example of where sport diplomacy is at play. So governments are looking at sport diplomacy now as a setting and an opportunity to further political, trade and social outcomes. So when you look at trade, that's exports, that's investment, as the Minister was talking about, it's about tourism, it's about education. All of those opportunities can be enhanced, more value can be unlocked if we talk about this in a really deliberate way. If we look at India, the first thing you're going to mention is cricket. The power of cricket, we think we're obsessed with rugby. Well, I think the Indians can teach us about passion. We look in awe of the IPL and the juggernaut that it is globally, the investment that's coming out of in India and out of India in terms of sport, the facilities that they have, is quite remarkable. Those are the opportunities that New Zealanders are looking to access. They're looking to, sports sector is looking to work into that and add value to that. We look at that history and the High Commissioner talked about it. So 100 years of sporting contact now between New Zealand and India. We're very, very special. Started with hockey and it's very powerful. I mean, India's second favourite team in cricket is New Zealand. Our athletes there and our coaches are rock stars. The most recognised New Zealander in India, unfortunately, is not Minister McLeod. It'll be a cricket player or a coach. It's a Stephen Fleming or a Kane Williamson. How can you as businesses leverage that sort of profile? And how can you use that for delivering on your trade ambitions, your business ambitions into India? Can I say this is two-way? Without question, while we look at the Indian system and we go, there's a lot for us to learn and to admire and to try and access. Equally, India want to do it the other way around. I was with the Indian Joint Secretary of Sport in Paris during the Olympic Games. He came to see me and marvel at little old New Zealand, 5 million people. We had 20 medals and 10 were gold. India ended up with 6 medals. 1 silver and 5 bronze for a nation of 1.5 million. So we have a lot of added value we can give them. So what we do know is India now are bidding for the 2036 Olympic Games and a stated objective to become a sports powerhouse of success. And New Zealand can play a really important role in supporting that. We have a lot of the knowledge, the expertise that they're looking for. They have the infrastructure, the people, the talent, but we have a lot of the smarts and they know that. To that degree, we're now exploring a memorandum of cooperation, government to government for sport, which will be a platform for all the things that you may wish to do and leverage, mandates it from a government down. And so we're working on that right now. So I think it's horses for courses, it's industry and company by company, but the opportunity there is to think about sport and the where sport can take you as you exercise your strategies within India.
Peter, that's very interesting, particularly about the MOU, because the next question I had for you was sort of key challenges in translating sports connections into commercial successes, and how perhaps our panellists might benefit from your expertise.
Well, I think you started with the unorthodox sport. I would argue to this room, one of the challenges is that sport is enormously powerful. Our chief executive of Cricket New Zealand, on a speed dial, can speak to the son of the second most powerful political person in India, Jay Shah. Yeah, he's now the chair of the ICC. Those are sorts of things. Sport has an amazing ability to attract incredibly powerful, power being wealthy and power being political, and sport has an informal way of accessing that. I think that's the first thing. The second thing, I don't think that we're very strategic. I think we're very tactical and we're very transactional. When we go there, this is a long game. Cricket New Zealand is a really good chiefs here. I know I compliment New Zealand cricket. They've been in India a long time. Deliberately go there all the time, as our trade minister is as well. This isn't a one-hit wonder. This is about building long-term, mutual, reciprocal relationships where everyone wins. And I think they're the two challenges that we have at the moment.
Excellent. Right, well, I want to pick up on these challenges and mechanisms for success. So we can all agree the scale of opportunities is immense, but challenges remain. We have some mechanisms exist to support trade, while others need improvement. So I'm going to ask each of our panellists what key challenges they're facing, and perhaps give some examples. It might be regulatory, it might be cultural, it might be geopolitical. So we'll start off with Justine. So,
Thanks, Christine. Look, I think we've sort of touched on just the sort of size and scale and complexity of the Indian market. I think it was the Minister talking about, the sort of just the size of the individual states within India, and certainly from a kind of a trade perspective, there can be quite different trading environments on a state-by-state basis. So, I think one of that can be a challenge for any exporter. I think just in general, New Zealand's size and scale means we're always going to be a sort of a relatively small player going into a much larger market. And one of the sort of tools that we found has been particularly helpful has been those really trusted local partnerships. So for both our ingredients and food service businesses, in India we've got very long-standing trusted partnerships with local distributors. Those relationships are really strong. They know us, we know them, and they can really be quite effective in helping us navigate those local trading conditions. I think from a dairy perspective, one of the other sort of challenges that we face in India is not unique necessarily in this regard, but is the sort of the regulatory and sort of trade environment from a tariff and non-tariff barrier perspective. These are issues that are more challenging and more intractable in some ways to deal with. And I think, from our perspective, really the only solution to addressing those over the longer term is an enhanced, stable and resilient trading relationship between New Zealand and India. And, I think we've been very heartened by the effort that this government and Your Excellency, the Indian government, are putting into building that enhanced partnership, because that is what is really going to kind of lay the groundwork for those future trading relationships to really lift up.
Thank you. John, would you like to?
Yeah, other than what I touched on before, and just picking up on Justine's point, our largest receiver in India has said to me on numerous occasions, if we remove the obvious barrier, he'd buy every apple that New Zealand grows. But, as I say, that relationship we have politically, hopefully, is heading that direction. A specific thing, and we just talked about sport, and I think it's a really good point that you made. 2 years ago, we did some stuff with Amelia Kerr, who's one of the best female cricketers in the world, and is highly recognised. However, looking back, we didn't know what to do with it, and that I think that's one of the key points, and it's so true. We know that India love cricket, for example, and we know who the people are that they recognise, but it's how you do a good job leveraging those relationships, those contractual relationships, to make the most out of it. So that's probably a key for us.
Thank you. So, I mean, that's a very good point, is understanding, culturally understanding the differences and nuances, which again works both ways.
Can I add on
that
this?
very much? Yes, go ahead.
I think picking on the point, we are talking about challenges, what we face, we understand what India needs, what are the challenges for India also. I'll give an example of understanding the culture, one thing. Same time, when you talk about the investment, the visas, the timeline of the visas, it will be hard to get a 5-year visa for an Indian businessman from an immigration New Zealand, that why you're coming here, and why should that guy who need to spend a couple of $1,000s to get into it, why should we bother to not get a 5-year visa? One. Second, from the again culture perspective, or education and tourism perspective, we are not getting people here, because one thing with India, if you want to learn India, you need to get to know more Indians also, to be very fair. We are a third largest diaspora, but there are another 1 billion people there too. We have a great tourism economy. Why we are not inviting Indians, to be very fair, and why it's not easy. A lot of couples, if you see, there's a new trend in India. It's easy to go to Singapore and Malaysia than going to even Chennai or Calcutta, because it's the ease of working. Singapore is the best example. I think New Zealand government is taking a lot of examples from Singapore in terms of mathematics and other things. Why not Singapore as a destination? That we can get tourism easy with Singapore, why not New Zealand? Flights, I think we are crying from how many years now, we don't know.
Yes. I knew it's coming.
I believe it's coming, I think 18 years for me also. But the idea is that to learn from India, that what we need, how to welcome India more. If we can bring Indians here, we go back, what they will eat here, what they will drink here, they want there. Again, going back, wine culture in India, a lot of Indians are there. There's a new culture of wine culture coming into. I can see, when I see that Jacob Reed from Australia is now everywhere, which is not a very high-end wine, so I don't want to go there. But New Zealand wines are not there even. And how we can open that small part. I don't want to say the sectoral agreement, but small wins are needed. We are waiting for a big win. We don't want to accept a small win, which is not right.
Shandon, what are your views? What are some of the key challenges you're facing?
I think I was quite impressed with the minister today when he quoted $3 billion as a number. And then just dissecting that number, that's a trade number. So that's not export to India. And what the minister was referring to it is as export and imports, which together categorizes as trade. And that's a very important factor. So while the minister understands the two-way movement of goods and services and talks about 3 billion as a key number, I think we also then need to look at all the support systems and agencies that have been built around it to say, is their mandate export to India or is their mandate trade with India, as an example. So the New Zealand businesses who are going there, for example, to export to India, have some, not as much as they would like, and a study is coming out on the effectiveness of agencies for New Zealand businesses. We're going to publish it soon. But the key is that organizations like us who are New Zealand companies who are going to India, we generate employment, but for reaching the globe, as you picked up in my last conversation, what is the support mechanism for those organizations to actually say that why you are going to India, and it will indirectly help both New Zealand and India, as an example. So some initiatives on picking up the theme of what the minister is saying about trade and not focused on only companies who are producing direct exports to India, I think is very, very important factor, and currently should be revisited from my perspective. Secondly, I feel the relationship with India I'm quite confident there is no free trade agreement on the plate for the next 1 or 2 years. We all know that deep in our heart, but there will be some sort of small agreements in place. And I think that's what New Zealand should try and leverage on. I think meat is a good example, and we have a good session hopefully after this, where we say the meat industry will suffer because of the trade agreement that Australia and India has in place. Can we go for a small agreement? And I think maybe kiwi fruit is another one. So we pick apple is another one. So we pick on those small wins, build on that with the Indian government, show our readiness and high value dairy products, absolutely, and then other things will follow. And I must say that along with that, the political alignment of New Zealand with India also will play a role in trade. You know, we cannot see trade in isolation, but whether it's United Nations, whether it's WTO, how aligned are the two economies for the greater partnership? I think you will find that negotiations with India will get very mature now. They won't be the same as you would have expected 10, 12 years ago. And I think sports and cricket diplomacy has a very good role to play, but will that impact the trade negotiators just because we have a very popular cricketer in Stephen Fleming? Maybe not. So that's my 2 cents, that yes, it has value, but it's going to be a very much political and trade combined together in the interest of both New Zealand and India. Thank you.
I just want to add on this is that, see, agree totally agree again. There's a lot of opportunities are there. I was just seeing the Incredible India banner. Again, this is Assam government. They said that we wanted, I'll not quote the names of people who said, we want dairy also. We want meat also. We want your adventure tourism. They said, we want to build ropeways. Why can't someone talk and come to us about it? Why not meat kind of processing industry? Same way, we know that West in India is lobbying dairy, but East in India is not lobbying dairy. So there are, if we dissect India in say 29 states, we go down in, there is opportunity for everyone, and there are a lot more. I don't know, a lot of people don't know, one of the largest exports from New Zealand to India is scrap metal. We talk about other things, we don't talk about scrap metal here. What do you, Christine? I think there's a lot to say.
Christine, can I just add that often India's viewed as a high volume, low value market, and actually that couldn't be further from the truth, particularly with apples. India is a large buyer of New Zealand apples, and they are the highest paying market we have. With the tariff added on, they pay the most money for a box of New Zealand apples any country in the world. So it's worth remembering that.
A very good point. Now, there's something been looming large in the last few weeks in geopolitics, and that's Trump and tariffs. And in The Economist's latest article was talking about how this may impact India's thinking of trade, and indeed it must be on the forefront of everybody's minds in New Zealand. I just have a question really for the panel. Anyone brave enough to answer, perhaps comment on it?
I can simply add it, grow with India. That'll be easier. Because if you can do more with India, you don't need any superpowers to have a trouble with. It's not that we can't do. Again, this tariff from Trump or anything happening between this morning when Trump making a call to Putin, what happens there? There will be always geopolitical issues. New Zealand, the best part is that we are friends to everyone. We're not fighting with everyone, but we need to stand where what the New Zealand we need. Same way with India. I think if you see Minister Jaishankar's comment, always he's been saying that we are for India first before we are anyone else. If India needs, and if India needs a partnership to happen, it will happen. And coming on to US tariffs and all, I think the economies want to come above that. That's what I see.
Anyone else? Justine, Shandon?
I think, like any business, it does come down to relationships. And I think the relationship at the top, at the leadership level, plays a very important role. So when it comes down to US or UK or other large economies, I think that leadership to leadership level relationship, peer to peer relationship does play an important part. But surprisingly, with what's happening between US and Canada, I sometimes question how deep is the Five Eyes that sometimes we talk about. So trade is big. When it comes to trade deficit and all, economies put things aside and say we will put tariff barriers on Canada if it's going to affect our balance of payments, as an example. And that's what Trump is doing. He's gone very commercial. And I sometimes feel that President Trump is a businessman first and a politician or a diplomat later. And that's what he's doing. He's saying there is balance of payments. And yes, we can sort things around 5 years and all later. It will just happen. But he's not too concerned. He's just going trade, economy, tariffs, and what is good for US. So interesting times. I'm sure there's more depth to it than what I can read between the lines.
Sport will solve it all. No, sorry. All I'd say is the world, as we know, has become clearly more fractured, more ambiguous, more complex. And in the end, it's about relationships. So I agree with you. And what we're talking about here is building deep, long-term relationships of mutual value. And so if we keep pursuing that with India, I think we're going to be in a good place.
Thank you. Justine, from Fonterra's, sorry, John. From Fonterra's point of view, how does it navigate these geopolitical sort of turmoil?
Yeah, look, I think it's pretty clear we're in for a bit of a bumpy ride for the foreseeable future from a geopolitical perspective, and certainly I think now is the time for like-minded partners to be looking for opportunities to do more together, and I think there's a real opportunity there for New Zealand and India. When we look out across the world, and we're very used to operating across pretty challenging, unpredictable markets, and so from our perspective, what builds a lot of risk and risk management and resilience into our business is optionality. So, the ability to adjust from a product mix perspective, from a market perspective, so that we can take account of these changes in the global environment and respond accordingly. And what we really need to build that resilience and that optionality is more partners. And again, I think there's a lot of opportunity for India and New Zealand in that space too. The other suggestion I have is with the Gulf diplomacy as a way to Trump's heart. So it's something for you to maybe think about.
You think before you thought that?
I was just going to add, I often think that New Zealand primary industry, not all, but some of us are always chasing a climatic or political event that creates an opportunity. And there's an example at the moment. South Africa have just been given the ability to export apples to Thailand. So that somewhat closes the door for us, but another one will open. And India-China relationships is a great example where Chinese apples don't get into India because India aren't happy with the trade imbalance. That's my understanding. I stand to be corrected. And it's also a great insight into the economic power of India. Who can stand up to China and say, you keep your products, in your country, we don't need them at the moment. That's a huge thing.
Thank you. Before we move on towards the end of this talk, I want to just make sure that the panelists have any further comments they'd like to make on issues of challenges or areas that they're operating in that may be of interest to the audience. We're good? All right. What I would like to move now is to say, if we're looking ahead, 2030, 2035, what's your vision for the New Zealand-India trade relationship? And most critical, what are those steps that the stakeholders, people in the room, should take now to ensure those long-term mutual benefits? So perhaps we'll start off with John, and we'll work our way through the panel. Thank you.
As an industry, 2035, we're looking to be a $2 billion export industry. We're $1 billion at the moment, so that's globally, obviously. For me and for Mr. Apple, I see an opportunity to partner with commercial operators in India where they grow perhaps our varieties, perhaps use our brand, counter-seasonal. Why not? There's work to do there, but if we can share our intellectual property, absolutely we can do it. Coming back this way, our industry to grow needs capital, and as the Minister talked about earlier, it's going to need to come from outside of New Zealand largely, I think. And why not? India has capital sitting there looking for a good home, and I think there's an opportunity for them to invest directly into our horticultural sector.
And we're going to move on to questions in about 5 minutes.
Thank you. So I think 2035, there are a few things that need to happen to strengthen and cement the New Zealand-India relationships. I think we need to see some large New Zealand companies show commitment to India with investment. So I think that it's not in the best interest for the large organizations to go to India for 2 years and then exit out and then go again and then exit out. It doesn't send the rest a nice message. What you need to do is to show this is a persistent relationship of mutual benefit, as an example. And I think we need to look at large New Zealand companies in the same way as other companies from other countries have done, and invest in that Make in India strategy. And I think having offices in India, having manufacturing in India, and making that investment is going to be very important. The second thing is, I think the technology exchange, innovation exchange should just freely happen between, or should happen by the time freely between the two countries. And there's a lot that New Zealand should bring into India or can bring into India. But at the same time, we forget that India has the largest payment interface with UPI, the Unified Payment Interface. 170 billion transactions happen on that payment gateway per year. Now that's a big number if you can just digest. And what would it take to bring that to New Zealand? And we keep talking about technology into India, but I think there's a lot that New Zealand needs to actually harness and leverage from India. But I think that's important. And I think lastly, it is just to change that the mental being of trade and negotiations with India. I think we need to move away from that traditional thinking of 20 years ago, and we need to make that significant change across diplomats, across agencies, across businesses in terms of how to deal with India. It's very different. And what we are doing is maybe if we keep trying to use the same techniques, it's going to be hard to achieve what we want in 2035.
Thanks, Chandran. Look, I think by 2030, India's dairy market is going to be even more significant than it is today. India has a long and proud history of dairy consumption. It's one of the largest dairy consuming markets in the world, and it's seen as a really important source of protein for the particularly vegetarian population. But consumption continues to grow due to a range of factors that we see in a number of other markets. Increasing urbanisation, the youth population, the recognition of the health and wellness benefits that dairy can bring to a balanced diet. And so many of the projections suggest that actually, at some point, India's ability to meet its dairy consumption demands domestically are going to be quite challenging. And at some point, imports will need to play a part in meeting that growing demand for dairy. So our hope by 2030 is that New Zealand is seen as the preferred partner of choice and source of dairy imports by India. And that we're able to play a small but important role in helping India meet its domestic dairy demand. For that to happen, of course, that all-important trading relationship is really critical, and I think that comes back to many of the themes that have come through in the panel today.
We know worldwide that sport is moving towards Asia in terms of influence and investment, and India is right in the middle of that.
So they're powering up to be the powerhouse of world sport. Our memorandum of cooperation with them, I hope, is a platform for which we can support that nation building and that opportunity within India that they're looking for, and equally here in New Zealand. That would see more ties, more opportunities, more teams playing against each other, but more than that, investment in New Zealand sport from India. New Zealanders, more New Zealanders in India applying their trade and using that as a platform for wider political, social and economic impact. But also, the vision I would have is here, a media care example. How can we help you, sport? I would say, Chen, and I agree, it's not a panacea. Sport is not a panacea, it's only a tool. So it's how we might help you to realise some of your ambitions if we use it strategically and use it really efficiently. And I hope by then we've got more examples in media care, because they're there, I think.
And Brad, we've got about a minute before we're running
I
out of questions.
in a small way that what we know about Bharatanatyam today in every Kiwi home and what we know about cricket in India, we want to make sure that at least one, as a council, I say that we should make sure that if an Indian homes can consume a New Zealand product or a New Zealand service in next 10 years, that would be great. And at the same time, if New Zealand can know India, deep dive that is from India, that is made in India. That's what we see.
Excellent. Okay, we have time for a few questions. And please ask the question up front so we can get through as many as possible. So we've got someone way down the back.
Hi, this is to John. So what is your appetite for exporting apples to more than the traders you are currently exporting? And we've got people in India who want to buy apples from New Zealand, but you guys do not sell it to them. So
I go to a thing called Asia Fruit Logistica in Hong Kong in September every year, and I would leave there with, and I'm not joking, at least 100 business cards from Indian importers. And in fact, 10 years ago we probably sold to 15 Indian importers, and now we're down to 4 with one key importer. And the reason for that is if you're selling little to many, you end up with a market where there's a lot of speculators, and that drives the price down very quickly. And the thing that we've looked for with our key customers now is good infrastructure. An apple is it's a seasonal product. As soon as it gets in the heat, it dies. So the cool chain has to be very good, and it has to be stored well. So we are selective around who we send to, and I get an email every week from someone else, and I welcome them, and we're very respectful with declining it. But the main person we work with has an enormous amount of cool storage. Those are the key things, and trust, obviously.
So what is the minimum volume for containers? How much would the person have to import from you for you to consider?
So our smallest customer in India last year probably took 10 containers, but our key customer probably took 300. So it's not about that. It's also about channel to market. If an online retailer, Ninjacart, I met them in Hong Kong and they're interested, so we're talking to them because we think they may be able to sell in a channel that's not currently filled with our product. So it's not that we don't want to talk to others and that we won't consider it. It's just that we have to be selective. Thanks.
Thank you. One more question.
I gather from the discussions of the panel that a good amount of work has been done by organizations on individual basis. Have you considered that we should enter into a formal trade agreement with India? Because there are advantages. India is very keen on entering into broad-based agreements rather than restrictive agreements that have been suggested. Britain is not one of them because that's a colonial mindset. But other countries, including Australia, they have entered into a broad-based agreement, and I think that will be an advantage to us because that will capture things that we lack of professionals, skills, lack of capital, entrepreneurial expertise, and things like that. And I think that would be a good thing to start thinking about it.
Any comment to the question from the panel?
See, we totally agree. If we can get the broad agreement with India, that will be always welcome. That's the one choice which even council or everybody in the room wanted. It's just how far that approach should follow. We need to reach somewhere. And personally, I believe that we have a lot to offer, a lot to gain if the complete agreement or a full-scale agreement comes in the picture. It's just the timing. How long you want to wait? That's the question.
I'll just quickly add, Australia is often used as an example. In my opinion, it's not a great example. They've got a trade agreement, obviously, with India. The commodities they export there that we export, such as apples, meat, dairy, it's in far smaller volumes. And you know, it's not that it's not worth referencing, but I don't think it's always the greatest example that we should compare ourselves with.
Right, well, I'd like to wrap it up there because this has been a really fascinating discussion, and I have to thank this wonderful group of panelists who are really showing how the private sector and with diplomacy and the India-New Zealand Business Council can really make a difference and are. So they're perhaps an example for everybody here. So with that, I'd like to pass over to Sean.
Thank you so much for such a brilliant conversation and productive talks we just had right here. Once again, my regards to all the panelists and moderator for amazing questions I've been exchanging. And with this, I would like to request you to take your seats. And thank you very much.